Hey everyone, this is Greg Plotkin from American Farmland Trust. We're talking farming in a pandemic again. This is episode 2 in our web series. So today I've got Catt Fields White. She wears a lot of hats. She's the founder of Farmers Market Pros. She's the director of San Diego Farmers Markets and also the co-host of the Tent Talk podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, San Diego Markets, actually.
San Diego Markets, got it. And so would you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up being so involved in farmers markets?
Sure. I come from a long history of serial entrepreneurship, everything from owning restaurants to publishing a magazine for independent restaurateurs to having a construction company that built restaurants. You see there's a food theme happening there. And when I moved to Little Italy in the downtown area of San Diego, loved the urban lifestyle, but eventually realized the one thing I had to get into a car to do was buy groceries. So in a completely self-serving way, I pulled together the farmers that I knew and some chefs, and we started a farmers market in Little Italy in 2008. Little bitty farmers market at that point. Right now, well, not right now, but up to a month or so ago, covers 6 blocks now every Saturday. We get usually 22,000 visitors on an average Saturday, 180 tents on the street. So we operate that market every week, year round, and then also 2 other markets, one on Wednesday and one on Tuesday in Pacific Beach. And those are 3 of the 40 plus farmers markets that are operated weekly in San Diego County.
Wow. So the reason that I really wanted to talk to you today is because you're one of the people, along with market managers all over the country, that are really on the front lines of trying to keep these markets open, both for farmers, but the communities that you serve too. So I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about what the last month has been like for you as rules and regulations and guidance and everything has changed day to day. How have you, as someone who runs markets, coped with that?
Yeah, I don't even love roller coasters on like in real life. And that is entirely what this has been for the last month. We were moving along, and then we started watching the news and the press conferences and the emails and realized on a Thursday afternoon that farmers markets were being suspended in San Diego County. So the county itself identified us originally as a gathering, even though state Department of Public Health guidelines identified farmers markets very clearly, along with grocery stores, as an essential part of the food system. So they closed preemptively farmers markets altogether. So we had something like a little more than 24 hours notice to notify all of those farmers and food makers that we were not going to be open on Saturday. Wow. Broke quite a few hearts there and probably hurt some businesses and some farmers a lot. We resorted to contacting everybody we knew to try and get that turned around. Meanwhile, the city had suspended all farmers markets permits. Then they gave us a permission to operate as a gathering. Okay. Meaning at that moment, that was early in the week. This has not been a day-to-day thing. It's been literally an hour-to-hour changing set of directives. So they gave us permission to operate as a gathering, which limited us to 50 people, including farmers and vendors. Obviously, big difference from what we're used to. We did figure out a system to do that. And then 2 days later, they changed the definition of gathering to 10 people, including farmers and vendors. And at that point, it was untenable. There was no way to actually have a market that looked like that, even for the most essential groceries. Meanwhile, we had been working to get the county to conform to state guidelines and consider us essential and consider us a grocery store and not a gathering. So that happened. We got that turned around, that the county did adjust their guidelines to match the state and made us an essential part of the food system again. And then the city, then we operated once. And then the city had a lot of issues with crowds at beaches and parks and various places. And in a reaction to that, they closed anything that resembled a gathering, whether it was part of the essential food system or not, the next Monday. So we were closed again. So we were closed that week. And then continued to work. So this is constant emails, constant phone calls, constant texting, submitting documents, revising documents. And they eventually allowed us to open. We opened last Saturday for the first time. I think we're the only market in the city of San Diego still operating, although that gets into a complicated situation because there are a number of markets that are 10 minutes from us that are technically not in San Diego. They're in an incorporated suburb. So there are markets in some parts of the county that have been open.
Right.
A few requirements, very restrictive. We're only allowed to, we took us from 6 blocks to 2 blocks. We're only allowed to have farmers. We're only allowed to have certain farmers. So, for instance, San Diego County has the largest number of flower growers and nurseries in the country.
Okay.
We can't have flowers at our market right now because they're not considered essential. And I think it's more optic than anything else. We have to maintain distancing like everybody else does. We have to meter our property now. So we count people in, we count people out. So there's never more than 50 people on a block at one time. Recently went to a requirement, I think it's a state requirement, that all grocery personnel, anybody that deals with food service, wears a mask. So all of our farmers and all of us have masks. So that's where we are. So we're at 20 vendors this weekend, 18 farmers, and then a baker and a fisherman. And we operated similar to that last weekend. So this is 2 weeks in a row that we'll be open. So that's really exciting for us right now.
It is. But what are you hearing from those vendors? Are they just happy to be there? Are they worried about the decrease in foot traffic and how that's going to affect them going forward? What's the vibe, I guess?
Well, they're very happy to be there. We had thought, because we were closed so suddenly, and obviously they had to scramble to sell something. Restaurants have all been closed except for some takeout. So, I mean, that's another big part of our farmers' sales revenue for their crops. So they've got no restaurants and they've got no markets, and they've got crops in the field that are ready to come up. And it's not like they can say, hang right there, broccoli, we'll get back to you in a month when farmers market opens.
So just stop growing, we'll wait a month.
Like some businesses where, although it's a crazy big struggle and who knows if they'll survive, these guys clearly will not survive if they can't get that food out of the ground and into the hands of eaters. So they jumped into, we helped facilitate some stuff. They did some really creative stuff on their own. They jumped into delivery boxes and pop-up markets in front of cheese shops, and a couple of them had CSA set up. A lot of times the public will say, well, just do a CSA. Well, that's not actually that easy. There's a whole system that requires, and it requires separate permitting from what's going on now. So there's a lot of things happening now that I think are definitely pushing the boundaries of legal permits.
Sure.
Luckily for us, the Ag Department has not seemed to consider that a crisis. So they've kind of let people keep going and selling things in different ways. And I have to say, as a market manager, I sort of wondered, well, will they find out that maybe this is a better model for them, selling produce boxes that people pick up side of the road as though you were dealing something illicit? Maybe this will be a good system for them.
Well, I've been talking to a lot of people about, all the challenges that farmers are facing right now, and if we can find any sort of silver lining in what's going on. And I do think that one of them, hopefully, is that this is drawing people to the people that grow food in their communities, their local farmers. It's forging those connections. And so I think that there's a lot of challenges ahead, but I think there is still some sense of optimism,
I will say that in our neighborhood, one of our neighbors is facilitating a farmer dropping off boxes, and then her neighbors come over one by one and pick them up off the patio, so they maintain the distancing. And we're here, and she's up to 40 boxes, I think, this week. So we're hearing from a lot of the neighbors, because they're friends, saying things like, oh my gosh, I've never tasted a strawberry like this. So I think long term, if we ever get back to normal, I think we've got some new farmers market shoppers that we're growing.
I think so,
but
too.
To get back to farmers, absolutely. To get back to the farmers' reaction, what we heard then, as soon as we said, okay, we are going to have a market next week, was, oh, thank goodness. I can't handle this pre-order thing. I can't handle the texts. I can't handle driving a box from here to there, one box at a time. So they're very relieved to get back to the market. Interestingly enough, our attendance has been crunched down to really low numbers because we've got to count the people in and out. But since we're only allowing one shopper per household, and we are counting them in and counting them out, and there's almost no other markets open, the sales actually are not down by much.
That's great.
Every single person who's there is there to buy. There's a lot of people coming to buy for 2 or 3 households, for other people that can't get out, whether they're older or they're just quarantined with kids or what have you. So people are coming in, they're really loading up, they're doing it efficiently, they're getting out, and then more people are coming in. And so they're really selling constantly from open to close. There's no lull time. There's no time when people are just browsing.
It's exciting that it's working. And I mean, I think that you're not the only market around the country that's trying to figure this out. And in fact, you have a whole other organization or business and farmers market pros where, you support markets and makers all around the country,
Right.
not just during this challenging time, but always trying to get them to figure out, how do we optimize sales? How do we do better as a market? So I just was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you're doing with that community now, because I see you out on the Facebook groups all the time trying to answer people's questions and
Right.
keep things going. So what does that look like for you?
We have a Facebook community that
Yep.
for Farmers Market Pros. So we've got managers, food makers, and farmers in there. So hearing a lot there, and then you're right, I'm in a lot of other groups and things as well. So we're hearing, it's interesting because in a lot of parts of the country, the markets aren't open yet.
Right.
This last month, even though it's been crazy and scary, their season doesn't start until a lot of times the end of April or the end of May. So it's just now actually reaching the point where they're starting to get really freaked out and having to make new plans.
Yeah.
They were concerned before, but now as their market dates open, we're seeing a lot of people push their market dates down. So if they typically open in April, now they're opening towards the end of May, hoping again that, and that's the crazy thing in all walks of life, certainly not just farmers markets or farmers.
Sure.
None of us know what's going to happen when. So it's hard to gauge. So a lot of them are pushing it down. A lot of them are developing alternative plans. I was just in a Farmers Market Coalition webinar a couple of days ago. There's a lot of people developing things like drive-through markets where you order in advance and then you drive through. In Alabama, you drive through and you pick up a box from each farmer. In Wisconsin, the market's taking pre-orders and then they're assembling them into boxes and you just drive up and you pick up one box and they put it in your trunk. There's no contact. It's an interesting thing. You can't do that for free. Somebody's got to pack those boxes and somebody's got to take those orders and process them. And so for me, we're not going in that direction. No matter what happens, we'll support other people that are doing it.
Sure.
But for me, it takes away what I spend my entire life trying to educate people about, which is that the important thing about farmers markets is buying direct from farmers and letting them keep the retail price. I don't have any desire to become a produce distributor. There's people that already do that well, but I don't think it serves farmers quite as well, especially small farmers, as farmers markets do, where they keep the whole retail price. So I understand organizations doing that in order to keep the continuity of having people contact you for their produce. But obviously, if it turns into a long time thing, if this goes on for months and months and months, as opposed to what it's looking like now, we hope, that's a really different model. That's not a farmer's market, in my opinion. It's a different thing. It still could be a thing and a positive thing, but it's not a farmer's market at that point. So we're seeing just a lot of really creative ideas. We're seeing a lot of people utilize new technology to do pre-orders. We're seeing a lot of people have to think about things like, how do you insure a delivery driver? It's not something you had to worry about as a farmer's market manager. But if you're setting up a delivery program, you've got that. So it's a whole new set of challenges, and it's really almost a new industry in a lot of areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're running out of time, but I do want to ask you one more question. So I wanted you to talk a bit about farmers markets as an essential service. Why do you think that is so important for, not just the public to understand, but kind of elected officials to understand?
And this is easy because I've been reciting this speech 7 or 8 hours a day for the last 3 weeks. Farmers markets are an essential service because they're a form of grocery store. And they're a form of grocery store where small farmers and local producers are the ones that keep the retail price. So that's the benefit to the farmers. From the consumer side, two things in this particular situation. One, we need nutrient-dense food. And that food is a lot healthier when it comes straight from the farm. There's a million studies out there. I don't have to do one from scratch that will tell you that fresher food has more nutrients. And when we're all fighting disease, we need a better immune system. We need more nutrients. So that's important. The other thing is farmers markets as modified now, certainly with the wide aisles and being outside and one-touch shopping, which I think is a critical element. They're a way healthier place to shop for groceries than a grocery store is. I somehow got tricked into going into a grocery store a few days ago for the first time. I haven't done that in so long. There's really narrow aisles there. If there's no such thing as 6-foot distancing, it just physically can't happen. And what I watched, and I watched my husband do it and said, what are you thinking? But I watched everybody else in the store do it too, is picking things up off the shelf, looking at them, checking the sodium content, looking at the ingredients, putting it back on the shelf. So by the time you go in there to buy something, you have no idea how many people have touched that can that you're picking up to put in your cart, and how many people touch the cart for that matter. At the markets, the way most markets are set up right now, it's truly one-touch shopping. So we don't allow people to squeeze the avocados or pick up the melons and sniff them at this point. You have to point at what you want. The farmer picks it up. He rings up your purchase. He sets the produce on an empty table in front of his booth. You pick up that produce and put it in your bag. That's who's touched it. Yep. Not 100 shoppers before you, just you two. So this really, in my opinion, is a far safer way to shop in this situation where we've got a virus that is transmitted so easily from touch. It's a way, way better place to shop. And then the last thing, which is critical, is that we have supply chains breaking down in this country. If you go into any grocery store and look at those empty shelves and you listen to the truckers talking about striking because they just can't keep up with the workload, and you think about people that say, what does it matter if raspberries are in season? My grocery store has them all the time. I think Mother Nature and local farmers just said, hold my beer.
Yeah.
Watch what's happening now if we don't keep our local food systems in business. And if the farmers can't sell, they can't plant. And so any situation we're dealing with now is going to look like child's play when we compare it to 4 to 6 months from now, when the crops that should be coming up, that should be going into the ground now and coming up then, aren't going to be there unless we keep these folks able to sell their product to consumers. That's true.
And selfishly, as someone who shops at the farmers market here where I live in Reno, Nevada every week, I hope that we can find a way to keep the markets open and thriving and farmers doing well all through the summer. So Catt, I just want to say thank you for joining us, and thank you so much for doing what you're doing in San Diego for farmers and the community there.
Thank you, and thank you and American Farmland Trust for supporting us. Farmers need land, and the farmers need the support that you guys provide.
Thank you so much, Catt.
Thanks.